Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite TV show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to listen to find out. This is your host, Samantha Parrish.
Hello there, and welcome back to the show. As always, my name is Samantha Parrish, and I am your lean, mean media queen, the Screen Queen. Would you believe me if I told you that if it wasn't for Romancing the Stone, we wouldn't have Back to the Future? For a guy like Robert Zemeckis, who made a film that's all about the right time and the right moment to have everything fall into place, his career had a hard time falling into place. He made some great films. However, they did not really appease the demands of many studios that were like, dude, you're not really pulling in the numbers, and we can't really have your project of Back to the Future until we know you have a surefire hit. And that's where Romancing the Stone comes in. But it obviously worked, considering we have 3 films of Back to the Future and a multitude of films that Robert Zemeckis has provided. He would eventually go on to go do Who Framed Roger Rabbit, The Polar Express, and everything happened solely because of Romancing the Stone. This film does not get enough credit, and that is what I'm here today to give this treasure of a film its proper glory. So here we go. This is the last episode for the Valentine series with Romancing the Stone. So, as always, I like to give a plot introduction to those that might have never seen Romancing the Stone. So, Romancing the Stone is about an author of a successful line of romance novels. Her name is Joan Wilder, like the kind of name you would see attached to romance novels. However, Joan Wilder herself is not so successful in the romance department. However, one day, she gets a call from her sister that there is a package in the mail. And this package in the mail is so vital, it caused a death of someone that was in her apartment that was just trying to get the package in time. Something about this package is so important because it's a treasure map. So good I had to whisper it. Her sister is in deep trouble, and she does not hesitate to get a ticket and go save her sister. However, she has 0 survival experience. And she's going into a part of the jungle with nothing but high heel shoes on, a $200 luggage, and $300 something in credits to be able to use to pay for stuff around the area. And this is where things get interesting. She encounters a man that was just doing one of his jobs and finds her, and his name is Jack Colton, the kind of guy you would definitely see Joan Wilder with a name like that. Jack Colton is like Indiana Jones Jr. This is a dude that's in the right place at the wrong time. However, these two do form an unlikely alliance, and you know where it's gonna lead to, an unlikely romance that's just stripped from the pages of the books she writes. The thing that I love about Romancing the Stone is that it does seem like that kind of story where you know that a woman who is down on her luck is going to be getting the greatest adventure of her life. And you want to see how that adventure is going to go. From the beginning of this film, it's hard to not fall in love with a character like Joan Wilder. Nowadays, you can have a character like her in almost every film or TV show of kind of like a cliche checklist. We have a character that doesn't have the best luck in romance. She stays home. She has a cat. Like, that almost seems cliched. But the way that she is willing to go into these situations because she cares about her sister so much. She's willing to do whatever it takes. And you get to see her growth. And I truly love that for a film that doesn't feel forced. And most of that is due to the fact that you're following 2 leads that have such good chemistry with each other. Originally, it wasn't going to be Kathleen Turner. Originally, Deborah Winger was going to play the part of Joan Wilder. However, she ended up biting him, and that did not gain her the part. I mean, like the saying, you can bite off more than you can chew, and I guess she did! And maybe that biting was truly a blessing in disguise, because I can't see anyone else besides Kathleen Turner playing this role. I love that actress in so many films, and this would mark the first of many collaborations that she would do with Michael Douglas. So, just like how Romancing the Stone became the pinpoint marker to jumpstart Robert Zemeckis' career, this also became a major pinpoint for her to do collaborations with Robert Zemeckis as well as Michael Douglas. And the film doesn't get enough credit for that. However, there is something this film got credit for, and that was being a ripoff of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like I said, I called Jack Colton Indiana Jones Jr. Even when I first saw the film, I'm like, this feels like Indiana Jones, and yours truly has never seen Indiana Jones. I know that's a crime I've committed that I've never seen it, but I know enough about it to kind of see what people are talking about. However, Romancing the Stone was written in 1979, which predates Indiana Jones. So, as much as it does look like it would be a ripoff, the sources do say and confirm that this was before Indiana Jones. It just happened to be the irony that there was some impeccable timing of having an adventurous romantic character written in the 70s, and then we would eventually have a adventurous character that would also go on romantic exploits. You know, the difference being the fact that Romancing the Stone is purely a romance film. I mean, look at the title. And then you'd have Indiana Jones, where it's just his adventures, and he just happens to have attractive companions that may or may not have been a thorn in the side of him, but then eventually fell in love. So I can see where there be a similarity due to Indiana Jones and Jack Colton, feeling that they're cut from the same cloth, but they have very different fabric. So I've talked a lot about Joan Wilder, but I want to give some recognition to Jack Colton because he truly is what puts the adventure in this adventure romance film. Michael Douglas is infectious as Jack Colton. Now, I know that you're supposed to watch a movie for the character and the story and not the actor, but this man truly does make Jack Colton believable. I know that Michael Douglas has been in many other films, and he would eventually go make his mark as an action man and eventually a Marvel man, but in the 80s he did a pretty good job at action films. And having a film like this, I really do feel that he catered so much to this role. I mean, shit, his name is in the beginning of the movie before you see the director, so you know he had a major part to play in this film while also having a major part to play in this film. Every time I see him in the scene where the mudslide comes through and he and Joan Wilder are like tossing and turning down the mudslide and he lands right near her crotch and he just goes, "God damn, I love this country." Oh my god, he says it with so much pizzazz that I believe that line and I believe Jack Colton. Everything about that delivery solely lets me know what kind of character I'm going to be following. That there's so much zest for life that Jack Colton has, that he is in a very dangerous part of the world and he loves every second of it for the adventure. A mudslide, that does nothing to him. Getting his water bucket shot, no problem, he shoots back. He is the kind of guy that can walk the walk and talk the talk, and goddamn, he has a good time doing it. But I don't think I could see anybody else but Michael Douglas playing Jack Colton. The character of Jack Colton is an underrated hero, and it almost doesn't suit him to be called a hero, where he's just a random dude in the jungle that just knows how to survive. But he does have some faults to him that are believable faults and almost forgivable faults, just like any person would have. He's a imperfect hero that we know is going to help Joan Wilder And you also get to enjoy watching his story as Joan Wilder quite literally falls into his life. And now he's faced with changes that he's never thought was going to happen. He can like survive in a jungle, but falling in love, oh, that's a whole different ballgame for him. And it's kind of nice that you get to see the way that he tackles these new feelings he has for Joan. There's always going to be characters that come through like Jack Colton, like Indiana Jones, but there's only going to be one Jack Colton. As much as I joked and called this film Indiana Jones Jr., this truly is miles away from Indiana Jones, and Jack Colton is a character that I can get behind. Jack and Joan have two completely different motives about working together. Joan wants to use the map as collateral for her sister, like she intended to, but Jack wants to use the map for what the map is actually intended for and to get to the treasure before the bad guys do. Matt Jack already has a good navigation of the land. He reveals in the film that where they're going so far, they're on their way to the treasure. They would be able to get to the treasure before the bad guys do. So that way, what are the bad guys going to get in the end? They're going to get nothing. That is kind of like a double win, knowing that there would be no reason for Joan's sister to be used as collateral if there is no treasure. But then there lies the whole danger of knowing, like, well, these are unpredictable bad guys. They're not afraid to kill people. I mean, shit, that's what happened to the guy in Joan's apartment. That is where the adventure starts to build so much for these characters. And it makes me forget for a hot second that I'm also waiting for these two characters to get together, but I also want to know, like, what's going to happen in the end for this treasure. Both these characters have a huge purpose that makes you so invested into wondering what's going to happen in the end. Not just for their romance, but what's going to happen in the whole grand scheme of it all. Jack makes a very good point in the film where he and Joan are talking about what the map is going to be used for. Joan says that the map is going to guarantee the survival of her sister, guarantee her life. Jack says, like hell it does, no matter what it is, it's going to be your sister's life. He makes a very good point. This would be a win-win for both of them, that their treasure would be found, the bad guys can't use it, and they could use the treasure as a collateral better than the map. Jack's plan does make more sense. But also, Joan's plans also make sense too. Jack doesn't really know what's entirely at stake. And also, neither does Joan, which does kind of proceed the adventure with some caution. But the way both of their motives marry in the middle is what they want out of the whole grand scheme of everything. And I love how you kind of get to see why they become so interested in each other. Joan wants to know what Jack really wants out of all of this. Jack reveals that he wants a boat. And you get to know more about Jack, and you can see the more Joan becomes fascinated with Jack, and in turn, along the way, how Jack becomes fascinated with Joan, but on their own terms, because they got to reveal more layers about themselves, which is kind of what romance is all about, and that's where the romance does marry with the adventure. But not only was this the beginning of Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas working with Robert Zemeckis, this also marks the companionship of a very important man, a part of Robert Zemeckis' movies, and that is Alan Silvestri. Now, you might not know this name, but Alan Silvestri has done a majority of scores. I mean, you could throw a dart, and you'll most likely find a movie that this man has done the music for. I mean, let me just click on his name, and I can just kind of prove to you once and for all exactly how much power this man has with music. So right off the bat, I see Beowulf, I see Night at the Museum, The Polar Express, Flight, of course, Allied, Avengers Infinity War, Welcome to Marwen. I mean, you get what I'm saying. This man has made a very huge contribution, But no matter how many films Alan Silvestri has done, he's always made time for Robert Zemeckis and has still done the scores for his films even as I'm speaking right now. And let me tell you, there are so many scores in the 80s that can just be summed up with saxophones, but I'll be goddamned if that isn't the most saxiest saxophone I've ever heard for a film. Like, I don't think I have been saxed more to hear something that I can listen to the music and know that's Romancing the Stone. That takes a lot to be able to make something that still has elements that are paralleled to the ambiance of the decade and still feel like it is unique and original. So, I want to take a moment to go back to my previous point that I made about the claim that Romancing the Stone ripped off Raiders of the Lost Ark. Romancing the Stone would have its own heyday where it got ripped off. Well, we gotta put quotation marks around ripped off. In 2022, a film called The Lost City came out, and let me tell you the plot of that, and see if you find any similarities. A reclusive romance novelist on a book tour with her cover model gets swept up in a kidnapping attempt that lands them both in a cutthroat jungle adventure. Now, I would say about half of that feels like Romancing the Stone, but when I first saw the trailer, the first thing that I said is, yeah, that sounds like Romancing the Stone. For a film like Romancing the Stone that had its heyday in the 80s and kind of lives vicariously through some movie marathons and some people that still carry that film to this day, it is still memorable enough to see comparisons. Even for me. I only saw this film maybe less than 10 times in my life, so having to see the trailer for The Lost City, I'm like, yep, there's some comparisons there. There's definitely some comparisons. The trivia itself on The Lost City even confirms that. And I'm going to read it to you right now, where it says, the name of the book tour was Romancing the Page, a reference to the movie Romancing the Stone, of which this film is a loose remake. But then there is a piece of trivia under that says, the premise for this film is very similar to Romancing the Stone. So, I don't know how I feel about The Lost City with it being called a tribute to Romancing the Stone and then being a loose remake of Romancing the Stone, but there has been no confirmation that it says this is a remake of Romancing the Stone. Most films would say this is a remake of the classic 1984 film. No, that wasn't mentioned. So it's a little bit strange when that film came out. I had nothing against The Lost City. I've seen it. I love me some Sandra Bullock, as I've mentioned before. I liked The Lost City, but I felt like Romancing the Stone just did the archetype of the lonely romance writer better, because I got to understand the character that's having trouble with love. The Lost City didn't really give that time to get to know who Loretta Sage was. I just know that she is down on her luck, and that's it. I know that the whole plot and purpose for Joan Wilder is that her sister's been kidnapped and she has to go out to the jungle. There's a sense of motive behind the character than Loretta Sage just getting hoisted into there. And that's it. And they made a whole bunch of crazy shenanigans happened. And there are crazy shenanigans within Romancing the Stone, but you also got to feel like you got the title of Romancing the Stone. You got to see the romance between Joan Wilder and Jack Colton. The Lost City didn't breathe enough. And like I said, this is supposed to be a remake slash loosely inspired by Romancing the Stone, with The Lost City being a film that doesn't really have a main staple of what exactly the identity is supposed to be. I don't really have a lot for it, because I'm going to go back to the main film where it all started. It goes back to the points that I made earlier, that we've already had the female archetype of the lonely romance writer, and it's been done several thousand times since Romancing the Stone. But Romancing the Stone put the work into it and didn't just let the archetype tell the story. I kind of call it like cheat writing, that it just shows you a character and that doesn't fulfill what you want to see more of that character. I got a lot with Joan Wilder and Jack Colton. In fact, it made me want more of Jack Colton and Joan Wilder, and oh boy, did we get more. Romancing the Stone was continued with The Jewel of the Nile, and oh boy, it did not hold up to its name. No, it did not. Now, personally, I have not seen The Jewel of the Nile. It's on my list, but the history alone is a little alarming. Romancing the Stone has such a wonderful chemistry between Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner that carries the film. And it has a great plot where there's just adventure. You're just like, oh my god, I can't wait to see that. Jewel of the Nile just felt like it had a quarter of what Romancing the Stone was. The plot alone is just a little bit on the nose, kind of cliched, which is kind of weird considering the film itself felt like a cliche, but didn't fall through on what you felt the cliches were going to do. So the plot of The Jewel of the Nile is, when Joan Wilder is abducted while on a trip along the Nile, her boyfriend Jack Colton and pal Ralph rush to rescue her and retrieve a fabled jewel. So, again, we're in the same mix of before, but this time Joan Wilder is the damsel in distress. In Romancing the Stone, she appeared to be the damsel in distress, but then she really found confidence and strength she never had, and ended up becoming the heroine of her own real-life story. And it became a huge successful novel, and she found things she never had. Now all of that character development is gone! That's what makes me a little bit perturbed to watch the second film, knowing that it's not upholding what I went into. The investment I had with Jack Colton and Joan Wilder just went out the window. And not only that, there were issues between Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. Kathleen Turner was not on board with this film. She was like, what have you done? This is not the Joan Wilder that I played. This is terrible. And so she wanted to leave the whole production, and she ended up getting sued by her co-star, Michael Douglas. So it's like, oh, well, we get a long way from Romancing the Stone to having a law dispute, but Jewel of the Nile did not do well. So in the weird run of it all, Kathleen Turner proved them right with what was going on, trying to make things better for the film. Now it just becomes a stain on what would have been a really good franchise to have that. But that didn't stop Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas from working on future projects together, but Jewel of the Nile is definitely a stain on their whole collaboration that they've ever done together. But even though Jewel of the Nile was more like Jewel of the Pile, there was going to be a plan to kind of erase the stain of what was the Jewel of the Nile. Michael Douglas and Danny DeVito and Kathleen Turner did work together on another story called The Crimson Evil, where Jack and Joan take their teenage kids to Thailand, where they are blackmailed into stealing a priceless statue. And that stayed put until 1997. And Michael Douglas said, all right, my time as Jack Colton has ended. I'm getting too old. I'm getting too tired. I can't do this. I mean, at least he didn't do what Harrison Ford did. However, that semi-retirement of the character for Jack Colton didn't stay retired very long when Michael Douglas said that he was going to be working on a second sequel called Racing the Monsoon, and there has been no further developments. That was in 2005 and 2008, so it's been untouched for quite some time and probably is going to be untouched. Then, there was the consideration of a reboot of Romancing the Stone, and as I said, that kind of already happened with The Lost City, and now, by 2011, the remake is going to be reworked as a television series. And oh boy, we all know how well those turn out, don't we? This is why, if it's not broken, don't fix it. This didn't need to be fixed. It didn't need a Jewel of the Nile. Romancing the Stone is so beautiful on its own. Romancing the Stone is like the perfect adventure film for people that are not adventure fans. I feel like there's always going to be that one film that you wouldn't watch that's not a part of your genre, but it appeals enough that it can be a film that you enjoy, and this is one of those films that makes it into a genre you don't watch. This is that film for me. I'm an action girl, but I'm not really an adventure girl. I love the fact that this is a film that plays the cards just right to be the perfect film to marry adventure and romance and not feel like it's taking away more than the other. I got to enjoy the adventure and I got to enjoy the romance. And that feels like the perfect segue to talk about, well, the romance behind Romancing the Stone with the development between Jack Colton and Joan Wilder. From the beginning of the film, it had to happen that these two were not going to get along. They come from vastly different worlds. Literally, vastly different worlds. And you do know that they are going to end up together. But you got to know them before you got to see them together. And I feel like that is the most important thing with making any romantic couples is knowing how are these two people going to counter the other person's idiosyncrasies or their pet peeves. Like, you're not going to love everything about somebody, but you have to know the things you don't like about somebody. And how those things can be worked on together. And clearly, like from the get-go, Jack does want the map for the fact that that can really get him to higher places in life. But then he ends up falling in love with Joan, and it's like, oh, buddy, so what you gonna do to get out of this one? He can't deny his feelings for Joan anymore, but there is something in the way that this has been his life. He lives for the adventures, and he is open with what he has done to Joan on so many levels that he doesn't just ignore her emotions, he doesn't ignore her feelings because he's falling in love with her. I feel like there are so many people that can be impatient or they can be annoyed very fast, but if they truly like somebody, then those peeves can be worked on. Those things can find some kind of merriment in the middle. There's a part that I love in the movie where Joan is getting so sick and tired of not getting to where she wants to be because she wants to rescue her sister. The quicker she can get to the jungle, the quicker she can get to her sister. She takes it upon herself to take the the knife. I don't know how to say it. I'm not an adventurer. I don't know how these tools are called, but as she's slashing through the vines, there is a plane crash that she's found, and there is a dead pilot sticking out of the window, bones and all, and it freaks her out. She turns around, Jack catches her, and he's like, hey, you okay? You alright? Like, I love the fact that he didn't take this as an opportunity to, like, pick on her. I mean, I don't think that there's anybody in this world that would ever make fun of someone for seeing a dead body. Like, even for someone like Jack, who's kind of numb and casual to a lot of what he sees in the jungle, but Joan is not used to that. She's horrified by it, and he's very quick to kind of console her. And that was like a nice little mood point to knowing, okay, these two are definitely working on that romance together. But we had that small moment before it led to a major part in their relationship, and oh boy, let me tell you about the major part of their relationship because it don't get any more iconic than the next scene I'm going to talk about. The next scene of Romancing the Stone is the scene that wasn't even going to happen. There was a part in the film where Jack and Joan are getting dinner because now they're kind of on the final stretch of getting to the location of where Joan's sister is being held. And so this was completely unplanned, but Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner just started dancing to the music. And Robert Zemeckis was just working on some stuff for the script and happened to look over, and he's like, my God, that's a beautiful moment. So he told the camera guy, like, hey, turn on the camera. And you catch a moment of these two co-stars dancing but it married into the film so well for character development for Joan and Jack. A unscripted dance scene led to the best character development. How about that shit? So I guess you could say that Robert Zemeckis had good timing. You know, he really needed that for his next film. But timing was of the essence for this film. Like I said, everything was riding on Romancing the Stone to have the next film, Back to the Future, come to fruition. And there is a piece of trivia that I have here that really explains a lot more of what was going on, even more than what I knew. So it says here, after the film's original cut scored very low with preview audiences, Fox Studios feared it would be a flop and Zemeckis was fired from his next film, Cocoon. Zemeckis knew this film could be saved and made a substantial change. The film was shortened, with material following the discovery of the crashed plane largely eliminated. So, like I said earlier with the plane crash scene, that really helped push the film forward, but they had to cut it just right. New scenes were written and shot, mostly involving the prologue and epilogue, focusing on Joan needing to find a good man. The original scenes of Joan with a male publisher were replaced by the moments with Gloria as her editor, taking her to a bar, encouraging her to date, and bolstering her romantic dreams and desires. Another big revision was the refilming the scene in the crashed plane where Joan and Jack learn about each other. Changes in Joan and Jack's appearances can be seen between the exterior shots of the plane to the studio shot interior, which was filmed 5 months later, including a weight gain by Michael Douglas. Thinking on that, I don't think I ever noticed that before. I'm always so entranced by this film that I forget a lot of my own trivia and I forget a lot of my own history, and I feel like that shows how powerful a film is, that there are inconveniences or mistakes or changes that don't really get noticed because of what is being projected. What projects is a good story, and like I just read there were a lot more revisions that had to be done. I can watch this movie right now and probably forget what I just read because I get so entranced just from the beginning. But it's also things like that that make me appreciate Romancing the Stone more, to see how much work was put into it. And that doesn't get enough credit for a writer or director with what they're willing to do to make a good story. If you're willing to go back and redo your own work because of how much faith you have in it, that's a sign how much you care about something. I've mentioned my story in Glorious Inc. several times, several thousand times actually, and I also had to go back and redo my entire first book and make it a 3-part re-release so I could project a story that I want people to love as much as I love it. So for my final points, what's not to love about Romancing the Stone? It's such a great romance film that doesn't take certain liberties of other romantic films, and it feels like a fresh new take on a adventure romance. And I love the fact that it's a character that you wouldn't really pen to be a part of a huge adventurous endeavor, but I love the fact that it does show more representation for female authors. From the very beginning of the film, when we see Joan Wilder crying over her work, for how much she feels for these characters that don't exist, but they're real to her. And there's not many movies or TV shows that have that angle where you see a author that has such pride in her work. And this movie has a placement on my shelf for just that reason. It's the only film that I have where it's centered around a storyteller, and how that storyteller becomes the main character of a story she would never think she'd be in a million years. She gets to be just like the main characters that she writes about. And I feel like that's what a majority of storytellers still want, is to get to have their own adventure like that, like the ones that they write. And this is an adventure that I can watch over and over and over again and still find new things to love about it every single time. Romancing the Stone is like the equivalent of the jack of all trades because it wasn't just a game changer for the genre of romance and the genre of adventure, but it was the game changer that ultimately changed Robert Zemeckis' life. And we got a whole bunch of actors that would eventually work together on similar projects. We got the birth of Alan Silvestri that launched him into doing more stuff. So when you look at this film, I want you to know that this is the film that changed so many lives, and it doesn't get enough credit for that. So I guess you could say that this movie really is the adventure of a lifetime. And I feel like that is a good note to end on for the ending of the Valentine series. This was kind of unexpected to just do 2 movies for the month of February, but I feel like it was good to kind of give some love back to myself and take it easy for the month of February. But I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to listen to the episodes that I put out. But before I dive into what the next episode of The Screen Queen is going to be, I want to make an announcement of a schedule change. With all of the recent adjustments that I've made with my mental health and getting more out there in my own life, so kind of doing like Joan Wilder, I need to go experience life more and not be cooped up all the time. I'm going to change the release date to be on Fridays instead of Sundays so I can have my weekends back. As much as it worked out working on the weekends, I also was not having a life on the weekends, and I need that back for me. And I feel like that's a better change for me, for the show, and I will still be putting out episodes every other week, so I'm still giving myself some time. So with that said, let's find out what the next episode of The Screen Queen is going to be. Okie dokie, so let me just mix this up really good. I have some new suggestions in here, so I'm a little interested to see what's going to happen. I'm losing count of what I put in here. Alright, okay, I just need the one. Get off my finger. There we go. What are you? Okay, that's a different choice. I think I forgot about this one. So the next episode on The Screen Queen is going to be an underrated flick called Mary Riley. So we got another underrated gem that we're going to be diving into on the next episode. But thank you so much for being here. If you want to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. And if you want to see the funny movie-related content that I put up, you can find me on my TikTok at The Mystical Space Witch. And if you also want to check out my republished series Inglorious Inc., you can find it on Amazon. But I made life a little easier, and you can find it in the description box. Alrighty, you all take care now. Have an adventure out there. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!